Hello and welcome to Moral Side of the News, our weekly discussion of today's top stories from a moral, ethical, and religious point of view. I'm Shawn Kaelin with the WHAS Crusade for Children, and I'm joined today, as always, by a distinguished panel of local religious leaders. Dr. Todd Stepp, pastor, Georgetown Church of the Nazarene; Father Joe Graffis, Archdiocese of Louisville; Reverend Jason Crosby, Center College; Rabbi Stan Miles, Louisville Melton School; and Reverend Daniel Corrie Shull, Burnett Avenue Baptist Church. We begin this week with the Easter Monday morning death of Pope Francis.
When he emerged onto the balcony at St. Peter's Basilica in 2013, few expected a pope who would so radically transform the papacy, injecting a new wave of optimism into the Catholic Church. Jorge Mario Bergoglio made history as the first pope from Latin America and the first Jesuit. He grew up in Buenos Aires, Argentina, the son of an Italian immigrant. An infection in his early 20s required the removal of part of his lung, which left him vulnerable to respiratory illnesses. After studying chemistry, he went to the seminary, becoming a priest when he was 32. As a cardinal in Argentina, he sold off the church mansion, cooked his own meals, and rode the subway while helping the poor. So it seemed fitting that the new pope would take his name from St. Francis of Assisi, who dedicated his life to caring for the poor. He was the first pope who refused to wear certain traditional papal vestments. This pope carried his own bags, paid his own bills. He was also the first pope not to live in the lavish papal residence, rather a small, modest apartment. Pope Francis brought change from the start. Instead of washing the feet of fellow priests on Holy Thursday, Francis chose juvenile prisoners, women, and non-Catholics. When ordinary Catholics wrote him letters of despair, he telephoned them personally. And this pope was determined to reach out, often riding in an open-air popemobile, wading into the crowds, greeting children, blessing the disabled, and posing for selfies. For many Catholics, the message was long overdue. Shift focus from the hot-button issues like abortion, gay marriage, and contraception toward a more inclusive church. The shift in tone, however, brought no change in doctrine. Francis called for a larger role for women in the church. At the same time, he reaffirmed church opposition to women priests. He took steps to express compassion for the LGBTQ community while holding fast to the church's strict teachings. In 2015, Pope Francis again made history when he became the first pope to address the U.S. Congress. Often referred to as the People's Pope, Francis will be remembered most for his disarming humility and humor, his warmth with children, his compassion for the poor and the sick.
I would ask each of you, whatever your capacity, to care one another. Be close to one another. Respect one another. I bless each one of you from my heart.
Pope Francis was 88 years old.
So panel, we turn to you. Your thoughts on the life and death of Pope Francis. Father Joe, seems fitting that we start with you.
Well, there's a lot of sadness, although I just saw him in the last couple months, and it's like he's not going to be long. And how fitting. I mean, he goes on Easter Sunday, gives the blessing, and goes out in the popemobile one last time, and then dies the next morning. I said, in the Christian tradition, to die on Easter Monday is pretty powerful. I think he had a profound influence on a lot of us. His simplicity, his ability to relate to people. I always loved some of his images. The church should be a field hospital. You have to really play with that image sometimes with the church. And then, don't condemn people, encounter them, accompany them, see where they are, and dialogue with them to maybe bring them forward. Of course, his last couple of years, he's really emphasized we need to be, the term is synodality, famous term, but listening church. So he's asking everybody to listen to one another. Where is the Spirit calling us to go? And I think that's a really good question, especially with so much change in the last 10 or 20 years in our world, even in the time of the 12 years he's been Pope. So I think he opened a lot of things, and fortunately there are some people in the church that didn't like him at all because he wasn't, hard and fast on a lot of things. He listened to a lot of people, but I was inspired by him in many ways because he was a pastor. And yet his writings are very readable and very clear. And he kept trying to get us back to the gospel. I think for all of us as synagogues or churches, sometimes we get into our institutionalism, and the institution's more important than the people. And he kept saying, no, the people are most important, and think of the people first. And I was a better pastor because of him.
He truly led by example.
Yeah.
He really did. There was a gentleness, a humanity about the man that was refreshing, and he was so believable.
Very inclusive of ecumenical and interfaith.
Yeah.
Right? He kept emphasizing with Muslims, with Buddhists, and all that. I think that, again, comes out of the Second Vatican Council, and he kept bringing us back to that. We haven't implemented it fully, and I think he's right about that.
Will this outreach continue, do you think, Joe?
I would think so. Out of the 135 cardinals that will be voting, he's, I believe, 80% of them, something like 100 of them, he is appointed. So I think they're going to look at some of those things. Some may want to take a little step backward. I don't know where they're going to be, but I think they're going to realize he was very much loved.
One of my initial thoughts is one that you brought up right at the beginning. What a great time to pass away. I mean, I've talked to different parishioners who have lost loved ones right at this season, and I've said, we're all going to die unless the Lord returns before him. We're all going to die, but if you're going to die, it's a sad time, but if you're going to die, what better time than at the time of the Easter celebration and resurrection? And I'm so glad that the Pope had the opportunity to provide that ministry on Easter and that celebration before and passing away on Easter Monday. And I think with someone with his magnitude, the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, the Roman Catholic Church, someone on a world scale, I think that becomes kind of a megaphone for the message of resurrection. And so that was my initial thought whenever I heard about this. So.
One other thing, and I agree with that, my mother died on Easter Monday, so I know that fact. I think he was really a moral voice, and people respected that. We're going to talk about younger people a little bit later. So many of younger people that I have met, they really like Pope Francis because they felt like he identified with them, and yet he could talk about morality from the principles of the New Testament, particularly the Gospel, and the Old Testament as well. And I think we needed that badly in our time.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I have sensed over the course of his tenure, this 12-year period in time where so much change has occurred, his emphasis on the least among us in a global sense has been a voice that has been desperately needed on the world stage as other voices in positions of leadership on the world stage have articulated a vision for the future that stands in sharp contrast with the way in which he understood, practiced, and preached the gospel. And so I, although outside of the Catholic Church, as one under the Christian umbrella, mourn his death because the leadership, the moral Christian leadership that he has put forth has been so invaluable, in my opinion, at this period in time. His emphasis on caring for the immigrant, the poor, the work that he has done to deal with sex abuse, transparency. In addition to his simplicity, the major causes that he has emphasized and taken on for me, have helped buoy me during times when other leaders have articulated, and let's be clear, a very different theological perspective to the world.
And he's also raised up the role of women in the church. Never got to ordination, but certainly in the Vatican, I mean, there's a couple women that are in charge of some major Vatican offices. That's never happened before.
Yeah, and I would agree that the focus on those things that impact us in a very positive way are very important. So, you know, obviously being a part of what we would call Catholic and Reformed tradition, so a Protestant tradition, there's obviously disagreements on theological matters between Protestants and Roman Catholics. But, I think I was just sharing earlier, I'm part of a global denomination, so there are certain parts of the world where that animosity is really strong, right? I think of my larger tradition, the Wesleyan Methodist tradition, I think back of John Wesley's, he wrote a number of things about the papist, and he corrected the Roman Catholic catechism of his day, right? But he also wrote this letter to a Roman Catholic that expanded the common agreements theologically, and really said, if you believe this much, then certainly I must acknowledge you as a Christian brother. And if I believe this much, you must acknowledge me. And so I think of things like the Joint Declaration on Justification, initially between Roman Catholic Church and the Lutherans, and then later the World Methodist Council, which my denomination was a part of at that time, signed on, and others now have signed on to it. I think of the 1700th anniversary of Nicaea and the Nicene Creed, and those kinds of things. With Pope Francis, there were obviously some things that I would disagree with. He was controversial at certain points, right? He'd like to walk up to a line sometimes, and there was the felt need in the Vatican is sometimes to speak out and say, well, when he says this, he didn't mean this, he meant this. Those things were there. But many of the things that you mentioned, his own simplicity, his involvement with the poor, the raising up of women in ministry, and of course we would encourage holy orders there, but still those things are things that we would look at and be encouraged by and inspired by. And in times like this, those are the things that we need to remind people in our own communities of faith, and be prayerful for those who are mourning and those who will be in conclave seeking to discern God's guidance for the next Pope.
I joined with all of the voices who have spoken previously, articulating condolences to the entire Catholic community in the loss of Pope Francis. I think we have lost one who has demonstrated by precept and by his very preachings and teachings and encyclicals and his general remarks what it is to be human at its best. I'm a bit embarrassed that sometimes the type of humanity that he demonstrated on the world stage was in such contrast to what seems to be popular in the United States of America. And there was that visit he made to the White House back a couple of years ago that was a bit embarrassing. And I think it was earlier this year, there was some back and forth between some of our high elected officials and the Holy Father, the Holy Pontiff. So I'm a bit embarrassed by that, and I felt like he left a little bit too soon because we need his witness now, maybe more than we ever needed his witness before, particularly as the forces of this really brutal conservatism not only sweeps America, but is sweeping across the globe.
The world.
As anti-Semitism has been made in vogue again, and his ecumenism and his efforts to build longer tables and invite more people to those tables are certainly needed today, tomorrow, next week, next month, and next year, because I don't think the current cultural climate will improve anytime soon. And so my heart is with my Catholic brothers and sisters, and I certainly stand in the hope that the Cardinals will select one who embodies and shares many of the same values related to humanity and ecumenism and care for the least of those principles that Jesus cared about. I've been reading about some of the more conservative elements of the church attempting to seize power in this moment. And I certainly hope that they are unsuccessful, because the world is conservative enough, and we need a counterbalance, both theologically and politically and relationally, to some of the more rigid views that are have been made popular in recent days. So again, my deepest condolences to all of my Catholic friends.
I'd like to add, and thank you, Corrie. I'd like to, one other issue we haven't talked about is his emphasis on care of creation. Mm-hmm. You know, he wrote a marvelously readable encyclical on care of creation, and he kept pushing that in a world that denies that there's even climate change. And he, as a former scientist himself, often said, you know, we can't deny this. This is a reality. And pushing that for all the world to be, you know, we need to care for one another. And one of his phrases is, we're all interconnected. The world and nature and humanity is all connected. It's never me. And I think that's a very powerful sign that I think will live on.
I read a wonderful quote from Pope Francis related to the interconnectedness of every species in the universe. He says that water does not drink itself, and trees do not eat their fruit. And humans must understand that they are at their best when they give themselves to others. I thought it was a beautiful quote, and I thought it was insightful. And I hope that the next pope will elevate concerns related to creation care, and I hope that it becomes official doctrine in the church. And I hope that
it already is.
Already is
by encyclicals, and Benedict did that, and even John Paul did that, but probably didn't raise it to the high level that Francis did.
You know, one thing that's interesting about this moment in time is you have 135 or so cardinals that will prepare to recess and debate and vote to select the next pope. In addition to Francis, his ability to see the global dynamics around him. This is one of these moments where I'm envious of my Catholic brothers and sisters coming from the church polity system that I am most familiar with, which is
You want to be the Pope, don't you?
Yeah, I want to be the Pope. I want to be... one thing that's fascinating.
Need a little seasoning.
In this, yeah, no joke. My wife might have some issues with that, or maybe not. I don't know. But the church structure, the global nature of the system, mandates and requires that you cannot have an America first mindset. You can't have an Argentina first mindset. This is one of the few examples in our world at the moment where you have voices from all around the globe coming together, looking at common concerns. And so the process in and of itself, I think, is helpful and needed at this point in time as a model to demonstrate what can happen when you have disparate people from every corner of the globe coming together, hopefully in good faith, to make an important determination about how the gospel will be exemplified and articulated in the days to come. So I'm prayerful as
Yeah,
this
he made
process
cardinals
unfolds.
from some, Myanmar and Tango and just areas that we don't even know where they are on the map sometimes, and not always some of the usual spots like Milan or Los Angeles or something like that, but trying to say, who has the smell of the sheep? Love his images like that, and
I think this moment has the potential to inspire a revival of ecumenism, because we who are Baptist people once had, and I guess we still do have, a great organization called the Baptist World Alliance, but it is not as supported, and people don't participate in it as they did 75 years ago, particularly in the aftermath of World War II. There was sort of an embracing of the idea that we are better together across international borders, and that religious leaders and denominations must bear responsibility in making the theological case for brotherhood and sisterhood, regardless of nationality. And so maybe what we see the Catholic Church doing, the Roman Catholic Church doing in this moment, will remind all of us, Baptists to have the World Baptist Alliance, and then Presbyterians. Yesterday, LPTS honored the late Reverend Dr. Cliff Kirkpatrick, that late stated clerk of the Presbyterian Church, and he did so much work for ecumenism and global dialogue around these common issues of climate and health care and food insecurity and water, clean water, and all of these issues that really emphasize our shared humanity and remind us that the world is a global house. It's God's house, and we're all God's children.
I think we were talking earlier about the conservative side of things. One thing that I would hope would happen, you obviously have people with different theological positions, different ideologies. What I would hope would happen is that pastoral ministry would be an influence. One does not have to hold the same position on climate change to recognize the need of creation, care, and stewardship. That ought to be something that's across the board. And so those kind of things, I think with ecumenical dialogue and that pastoral approach to things, I would hope would be influential to kind of dial down some of the, not only rhetoric, but just the sense of animosity.
Finding common ground.
Yeah.
Ecumenism is a wonderful thing, but it's a limited. The word ecumenism means between the churches. I think it needs to go wider than that. I want a seat at that table, because I think that the Jewish world and the Islamic world and the Buddhist world and the Hindu world have something to offer as well.
And Pope Francis, he demonstrated that, because he also participated in interfaith dialogue and really reaching across faith traditions and national. I think it's a wonderful example. I think you're exactly right.
And I just keep thinking, this soul was both embracing and embraceable. He really...
One of our rabbis who's not here, Gelia Rooks, often would always ask me for some of Pope Francis's writings. And one of the things she said, Josh and I read his writings, and she said, he makes me a better Jew. If I follow what he's teaching, I'm a better Jew. And I thought that's a very interesting thing. But I've also heard that from many Protestant minister friends of mine who've said, no, we look to him, he helped us in the way we preach. So
look at the way the man lived his life.
simple.
Going on the subway, rejecting the palace for the apartment.
Wearing black shoes.
As opposed to white shoes?
Some popes wore red shoes or something like that.
Yeah, no, I did
he
think
did
that
very simple.
He should have maintained the tradition of red shoes. Elvis had blue shoes, blue suede shoes. And the Pope has red shoes. Black shoes are for Baptist preachers.
You can still ride the subway and wear red shoes. So, yeah.
You're exactly right. Exactly.
It was reported just, I think, yesterday that he died with $100 to his name.
Something like that.
I'm a Roman Catholic, full disclosure, and I was struck when he first addressed the people as Pope and he said, "Pray for me." You just don't hear that from leaders very much, that they need your prayers and his humility.
And then he said, "Will you all bless me before I bless you?"
Wow.
There's a humility. There's a saintly humility there.
Right.
Now, did he stop cooking his food once he went to Rome?
Now they have
Vatican City?
at Santa Marta. They have a cafeteria or something like that. He usually ate down there.
Really?
Yeah, with
Now,
all the other guests there, all of a sudden you'd run up to the Pope getting an extra drink or something like that. They said, "Oh, good morning, Holy Father."
Now, is their pasta as good as the indigenous restaurants around Rome?
Italy pasta is very good.
It is fantastic. Yes.
We have really less than a minute left, so I don't know if we can get on to another topic or not. But
Well, I just think the other
conclave
topic
begins.
about kids, and I think the one thing it's interesting to hear that poll. I deal with a lot of teenagers because of high school work at Presentation and Trinity and several other places. So I talked to a lot of kids, and they really loved Pope Francis because they understood his words, they understood his ideas and his simplicity, and that he was relatable. And I think so often in our churches we need to do that. The more we do that, and unfortunately we have elements in our church that are backing off of that, like I'm better than you, so, and all that kind of stuff. And he was always against clericalism, like saying you're better, you're a servant of somebody else.
Before time runs out, I just want to say one quick thing about these conversations that we have on the moral side. We have talked about the significance and importance of theological dialogue and how it can be transformative in a world full of vitriol and explosive rhetoric. I'm appreciative of this group because it's a model for that at a local level of what good faith dialogue entails.
Thank you. We're going to have to end it there. Great. Thank you, Jason, so much. We'll see you again next week on Moral Side of the News.